introduce ourselves quick. Joe?
Joe Eichstead, City Engineer.
Paul Vollert, Public Works Superintendent.
Ryan Austin, District 1 Alderman.
Dennis Pollock, Alderman from 6.
Thank you. Item number 2, review engineering and street department monthly activity report. Joe?
So for the month of April, quick do a summary here of activities. Definitely have seen an increase in Diggers Hotline locates for the month. We also finalized a traffic study for the 13th Street and Prospect Street neighborhood. The report is actually included in the packet just for your review. And if there is a desire to add it to the referral list at this meeting, we can certainly do that or consider it, as there is a proposal to add signage for that intersection. Additionally, the city was unofficially awarded ITS standalone signal grant. It's the same grant that we currently have for the West Grand Avenue intersection. We reapplied for the Chase Street and High Street intersections. We're just waiting on official letter or transmittal correspondence stating as such, but that's verbally, that's what we've heard on that grant application. We also have a curb and gutter and sidewalk maintenance contract that's proposed to be bid next week, Thursday, May 11th, for a bid opening. And then consideration for the Public Works Committee to perhaps hold a special meeting before council then perhaps on the 16th, if that works out with scheduling. For our 2023 reconstruction projects, we did notice last week and then reiterated closure on A Street at Oak Street intersection beginning for tomorrow, Wednesday, May 3rd, starting at 6:30 a.m. And that closure will persist for approximately 3 weeks for the underground utility replacement and restoration of the pavement in the intersection. That closure is detoured, and all of that information has been communicated online through Facebook and in the city's website. Additionally, you may recall the city council approving a grant application for a highway safety improvement grant for the 8th Street South and Wood Avenue pedestrian crossing. That grant has been approved by the Wisconsin DOT, and so we'll be probably getting further information from the state on that in the coming weeks. And then lastly, the West Jackson Street project is primarily complete. The crews were in here last week doing the final restoration, placing the sod and final punch list items for that project. There's a couple minor things left, but primarily the restoration work is now complete. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on your study here on that 14th Street, your stop sign and yields, I know I had just kind of mentioned it to you at a time, Joe, but just for the committee, I was looking if from Oak Street to Baker, if this yield sign goes in on Avon, if maybe Prospect and Washington can also be looked at and maybe put a yield sign and maybe make 14th basically a through street from Oak to Baker.
And we did look at that. I guess, the way the city's road network is laid out, we do have through streets within a couple blocks from 14th. We've got one on 16th Street. That's a through street. It's a collector level classification, as well as 11th Street, which is 3 blocks west of there. So,
Well, you can include 12th Street too, you just stop at Saratoga, but that's basically a through street. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Joe. I didn't mean to
Sure.
interrupt. Go ahead.
nope, that's all I really needed to say on it, just that we did look at it briefly. But, you know, the through condition would largely be, we'd want to keep those on the collector streets, the higher road classification roadways.
Okay, I just brought it up to the committee's attention. They can look at it and decide. Thank you. That's it, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else? Item number 3 is review and consider approval of change order number 1 for the 2023 concrete contract for reconstruction projects. Joe?
Did you want to hear the DPW report for the
Oh,
month?
yeah, I skipped, yep. DPW report, it's back up.
Thanks, Joe. Our report is attached. First items on top of the report, we completed the restoration of the 9th Avenue project from West Grand Avenue to Fremont Street. Our construction crew started the Oak Street project the first week of April and have since completed 3 blocks worth, as Joe has stated. Tomorrow morning at 6:30, the 8th Street intersection will be closing for the duration of time to complete the underground work until we can get the binder or the asphalt put back into place. Over the last 3 weeks, we've completed installation of 800 feet of 12-inch sanitary main, 3 sanitary manholes, 8 private services, along with 1 storm manhole and 5 catch basins and leads, as well as 675 feet of 12-inch C900 water main. Our street maintenance activities have continued on. There has been, the last month, a couple snowstorms that we battled. Otherwise, we continued to cold patch 8th Street and the highways, did a few sanitary manhole repairs, and as of, I believe, last week Friday, we have completed going through and doing our our first street sweeping of the year, getting rid of all the sand and winter debris. So that should have been through all of the residential areas. May have a few streets or of the highways to clean up due to the snow events, but for the most part, everything has been completed one time. The other substantial thing is that we've continued to fix snowplow damage that occurred from snow events prior to the ground freezing or after the ground has thawed out. We had some staff complete flagger training. And then you may have noticed along State Highway 3413 from Grand Avenue here to the overpass, and then on the Easter Review Expressway from County Trunk W to 8th and including the 8th Street intersection, that we applied mastic over our concrete streets to try to prevent the joint failure and things like that. That work will commence again later this fall on some other streets. We also have done a couple catch basin maintenance over here north of City Hall around the paper mill and Lycon area, as well as assisting the Parks Department in digging the footings for a prairie dog exhibit. The sign shop, we are still just with 1 staff member there, so he's been doing the best he can by himself, fixing damage from the winter, as well as going through and working through replacing our traffic signs that no longer meet the MUTCD requirements. As you can see there, the speed limit signs, we've upgraded everything from 25, 30, 35, and 40 miles an hour. And he'd be continuing on there, just we ran out of some stock. So otherwise, like I say, he's also completed the removal of the parking signs that was approved last month on 3rd Street between Grand and Oak. We still have to work with the contractor to remove the yellow painted curb in those areas, but otherwise the signs themselves have been removed, and then we'll probably have to paint the stalls there as soon as the road temperatures get up. Our shop has been busy transferring over from from winter to summer. For the most part, everything has been switched over. There's some pieces of equipment that we don't switch over. So they just have to go through and make sure that those are ready to go for next year. We also had to rebuild a floor on one of the garbage trucks and then replace a hydraulic cylinder that cracked on us. And that completes my report.
Thanks, Paul. Joe, I got just a question I thought of as we're going on here. Oak Street and 8th Street, the intersection, and closing that, has everything been taken care of with the school there as far as pickup, drop-offs and all that? I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, yep, everything, they needed communication 2 weeks in advance of that closure, and we provided that to them at that time along with an exhibit they provided some details of the operation. We offered to provide an exhibit for them in return for, just helping aid in their communication. And so that was all done 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. And with that, we can go, I think, to number 3, and that's review and consider approval of the change order number 1 for 2023 concrete contract for the reconstruction projects.
So included in the packet, along with the referral, is the change order document which describes all of the, I guess, additions, modifications, subtractions. Primarily, I guess in summary, there's 3 primary items. The radial detectable warning fields. There were 2 intersections on the Oak Street project that have these radial domes for the pedestrian curb ramps that were included in the plans, but we did not have them articulated on the bidding documents. So this one change would remove the standard detectable warning fields for those locations and add the radial detectable warning fields. In addition, there were 3 bid items, kind of a housekeeping sort of thing for a couple of them anyway, that we had the wrong units of measure that were where we had square feet when it should have been lineal feet. All of the unit prices were appropriate there. There was the one item that we are changing was the concrete pavement patching from square feet to square yards. So there is an additional cost there. And then lastly, for the work along 2nd Avenue South with the paver replacement project and replacing that with colored concrete, that item is being added into the contract as well. Of course, that was previously approved in December of 2022, but as part of the formal process of adding that cost into the contract, the change order policy requires it to be brought before the committee. So the total increase for this change order was $55,800. Nothing has changed from the plans. It's more so just correcting some of the bidding documents. So, but with that, there is, the change order policy is included in here as well. And so anything over $5,000 and exceeding 8% of the contract should be reviewed and approved by the Public Works Committee. So the way the policy has been, following the policy and the way that the committee has reviewed and approved change orders in the past, it's the Public Works Committee that it doesn't go to council. The Public Works Committee makes the decision at this committee level. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. That's at least how the policy's read and been interpreted in the past.
Any questions by anybody? Anything?
So, Joe, you said the drawings were not going to change. Was this scope identified in the documents that these contractors received?
Yes. So
Are you saying this is a miss that they're going back for?
So the plans that were included in the bidding documents, they've all seen those. It was in the scheduled prices where they're adding their unit prices. That's where the units of measure changed. The radial domes were not included, so that, I guess that's a clarification on those items. That was included in the plans, but not reflected as a bid item. And then the paver replacement, the colored concrete was not a bid item either. So that's a new bid item altogether.
Okay, and our drawings reflected, or the scope documents reflected the wrong units? That was,
Yeah, the bidding document reflected the wrong units. The plan showed the right items, the radial detectable warning fields. And, perhaps the contractors, they knew it ahead of time when they bid. They didn't inform us of those changes, otherwise we would have done an addendum before the bid opening to modify it in advance of the bid. But they did follow up, I believe it was a couple days after, that, hey, they noticed these items, and so the unit of measures, those were just, I guess, typo type of mistakes on the scheduled prices.
can you refresh my memory, the concrete contract, was it just one bidder on there, or were there multiple?
There were at least two. I'd have to look to see if there were more than that.
It's one of those scenarios where, I get it, you missed the number, but at the same time, do we need to go back and ensure that we're getting the lowest bidder at
Sure.
this point?
So the radial detectable warning fields, we had some of those in last year's contract, and the pricing that they have identified for that is consistent between last year and this change order. What was the other item? Oh, the concrete pavement patching for removal of concrete pavement, that particular item. Since it's actually the same contractor, they have the same unit prices last year for $27 per square yard. That's what we'd be proposing in this change order to change it to.
So in a nutshell, you support that these change orders that are listed?
Pardon me?
And you support these change orders that are listed, and you don't feel it's necessary for us to go back and potentially rebid this contract?
Right, yep, I support these changes. I've reviewed the unit costs provided by the contractor, and all of them seem to be reasonable values.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Otherwise, committee, what's your interest?
I'll move to approve change order number 1 for the 2023 concrete contract.
We have a motion and a second to approve change order number 1. Committee will vote. All in favor respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 4 is review and consider modifying the parking ordinance on the east side of 16th Street South between just south of Pepper Avenue to East Riverview Expressway.
So there was a concern or parking complaint that came into the engineering department office regarding the extents of the allowed parking on the east side of 16th Street, just south of Pepper Avenue. That kind of was the catalyst for looking to see what was identified in the ordinance for the current parking restrictions further north of that location. And in looking through the ordinance, we didn't find that the parking was restricted at all on the east side of 16th Street from the just south of Pepper location all the way up to the expressway. So that's the primary item for this referral, is to get a parking restriction added into the parking ordinance. But then secondly, back to the parking complaint, Just south of Pepper Avenue, you can kind of see in the image in the referral that there's a painted median that starts to diverge in the through traffic going northbound, kind of deviates off to towards the parking lane. And some drivers have, and I've heard it more than once, that if a vehicle parks right up to the no parking sign, just basically at the end of that red box on the image, that they get off, feel like they're really close to that parked vehicle when they travel through there. So what we're recommending is that along with adding a parking restriction ordinance for the east side of 16th Street, that we would modify that south extent of the no parking restriction, move it a little bit further south, about 50 feet further south, just to make sure that it's not, vehicles aren't parking within the proximity of through traffic, maneuvering further to the east. So I guess the way that this would read is that to approve a no parking ordinance for the east side of 16th Street from 230 feet south of Pepper Avenue to the East Riverview Expressway.
Any question by anybody, or follow along? Brian?
So I assume this was basically parking allowed because of the high school and the parking requirements that were necessary there. But now with the addition to the parking lot, do we have any data, or do we know that we don't necessarily need as much parking on the street there? Is it a safe assumption?
Yeah, that's a good question as far as how far the parking extends to the south there. Let me see here. I mean, certainly it's still utilized, vehicles still park up to that parking sign. I guess the question is how far south they actually extend towards Grove Avenue. That I'm not entirely sure how far the vehicles extend to the south, but parking's allowed. Let me see if I can get a measurement here. So from the Pepper Avenue intersection, parking's allowed for another quarter mile to the south, I believe on the east side of 16th Street. So I would think moving it 50 feet would be sufficient. I don't know that the high school students park all the way down that far, but I guess it is a good question.
Anything else by anybody? Committee, what would be your recommendation?
I'll move to add the no parking ordinance on the east side of 16th Street from Pepper Avenue to 230 feet south of Pepper Avenue.
I'll second that, okay. But motion and second to approve, committee, all in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Number 5 is to review the Wisconsin Rapids Rail feasibility study. Joe, I guess, where do we want to start here? Alderperson Veneman stayed over from finance. We talked about it a little before the meeting that was on our agenda here, and to see where we were going, we had a committee of the whole meeting a couple months ago or so, I think, on it, whenever that was, and I guess so. I guess what do we want to get into tonight?
So I do have just a brief update. I mean, we can, if there's an intent to have it discussed at a committee of the whole, you know, we can do either. We can discuss it, you know, both today and again in the future, or whatever anybody would like to see. I did kind of summarize a very brief update in the referral document. There was it was in April, beginning of April, I think it was April 7th, but as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there was a grant opportunity that became available that was it's called the Carbon Reduction Grant, and that initially opened up sometime last year but they quickly closed the grant application process at that time because of being a new grant. They had some kinks, I think, in the language and the application criteria that they needed to get ironed out. So the DOT closed it, but they reopened it this spring, but for a very short period of time. It was open for 2 or 3 weeks, where people could get their applications submitted and incorporated into that. So the carbon reduction grant is primarily for non-infrastructure, non-pavement type of projects. Some of the examples they had in there were changing out street lighting from like high-pressure sodium to LED, for instance. And so as long as you could show that you were reducing the carbon footprint or the emissions from vehicles, it was an eligible project as long as it didn't include adding lanes of pavement. So with a very short time frame, did talk to the mayor about it, and we decided to get an application submitted for the technology alternative that was part of the rail study. There's no strings attached to it as far as if they were to award the project to the city. The city doesn't need to accept it by any means, but given the short time frame and the potential interest, it was a fairly short application to get submitted. So we did go ahead and submit that. And so I guess that's an update on that particular item. I have had some conversations as well with the DOT, just to kind of get their initial, introduce them to the efforts of the city so far and just get some initial feedback. At this time, they're not stating that they have any funds available to cooperate with a project on connecting highways, and that they'd be definitely open to continuing that line of communication, though, as the city's conversation progresses. And then they also didn't preclude any of the alternatives that were listed in the study, so they didn't, being so preliminary, they didn't want to state either way if they were, that there were any red flags or anything that jumped out at them for any of the options as being not viable, such as the underpass or the overpass. So they were neutral on it, I guess. And then with CN, Canadian National, we did reach out to them to get some list of contacts regarding the rail study and the alternatives, and I have yet to schedule specific discussions with, I think I have two different contacts now for CN to reach out to directly. So that should be forthcoming. But other than that, I guess it'd just be more of potentially a conversation on the alternatives, and if there's any preferences or any narrowing of that list that if there's a desire by the committee or the council to pursue any particular ones, or if we could perhaps even get Patrick Engineering in, or on a Zoom call or something, if there's specific things that we want to hear directly from them. In fact, I did reach out to them about other experience that they have with these types of projects with an overpass or underpass or track relocation, and their experience getting grant funding and to what extent they were able to get those projects funded. And so that information, I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But it might give us some insight into the likelihood of receiving grant dollars and where those funds may come from for any project that the city would choose to do.
Thank you, Joe. Questions from anybody or whatever? Ryan, you can start off.
In lieu of an underpass, which is my preferred, or overpass, which I really think is warranted in this situation, but I understand there's multiple players that'll have to come to the table. It's not just going to be a city project. It's going to be state. It's going to be CN. In lieu of all that, I am intrigued by the alternative route signage option that we discussed. Is that predictive mobility? Is that the right title for that?
Yes, yep.
Just this weekend, I was coming down West Grand, and you could see that there was a train crossing in the distance, but you couldn't see the train. You couldn't tell which direction it was coming from, and I thought to myself, if there was some type of notification, I could, instead of gambling on which way to try to avoid the train, I would know. And, it would save time. And I think the study reflected that 99% of the time there is an alternate route that can be taken in lieu of, you pull up to West Grand and eventually traffic fills in behind you and you're stuck, right? So to me, I'd be interested in hearing more about the alternative route signage, placement, what that looks like. I think that could be a potential option to, in the short term, at least try to alleviate some of the backups and issues that we've seen.
Thank you. Dean, did you have anything to add?
Ryan, at this point, it's hard to seem to get anybody at the table, but we're sort of not prepared to get people at the table. It's like, it says in this, finalize the list of alternatives. So where are we at on that? I mean, we had the committee of the whole, but off the top of my head, I don't remember. We went through a list of alternatives, but not finalized. Is that?
Yeah, the council hasn't finalized the list. It's just, if there were any other ideas that were floating around out there, or anything else that should be included as an option that maybe wasn't part of the study, it'd be good to add it to the list, and, might be to add it to the list and then strike it off. But it's something that, if there were any other ideas kind of floating around out there, that we get those identified and included as part of the discussion. But, otherwise, as far as finalizing that list, narrowing that list down is helpful. But I mean, it's kind of, the conversation that you guys were just having is essentially doing that. It helps to provide a, focus. Otherwise, there's 18 alternatives and lots of directions that could be taken to, get to any one of those alternatives. But so certainly the predictive mobility, the grant application that we did submit, I mean, it does seem to be a really good fit for that grant. I guess we'll see what happens. I think sometime in May, early June, we should hear back from them. But the project that was submitted was for the full rollout of predictive mobility. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was an 80-20 grant. And I think the total amount that we came to, the study had about $350,000 included in there. And I think our grant application was up around $400,000 for a total project. But that would certainly be a more immediate project, something that could be done, in comparison, much cheaper than the other alternatives. And then, if it's not as, if there's still a significant amount of inconvenience thereafter, a longer-term alternative could also be pursued.
Yeah, I live on the west side, of course, and I had one at Gaynor Avenue the other day that was 15 minutes with the train not moving. It was stopped. I've said this before in council meetings, it seems to me the bottom line is when an ambulance can't make it around something, and somebody passes, that's when you know what's going to hit the fan.
Right.
I mean, it was dead stop. I don't know. But I'd be interested in hearing more about looking into this predictive mobility. So you said the 80, I missed the 80/20 comment.
Yeah, I believe that if my memory serves me right, the carbon reduction grant was 80% state federal funds and 20% local match.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think just we'll keep this here and proceed, I guess, as new information comes along or whatever, if we want to have another meeting on it or wherever, or to schedule, see if we can get other people in to at a meeting, that'd be good, I think, too, at some point in time, so.
And I can share the grant application that we submitted with the council so that you guys can see that, that document, the cost estimate and the narrative that we included with that. It might help describe that, the predictive mobility option a bit further, so you guys could get a sense of how that might be implemented and operate as well. And I believe there's the company had mentioned that there's what would you call it? Just a trial where you can download the application and kind of see I don't know if it's if it's just a mock demo of the application or if it's a live feed of another application that they have running. But they offered to come in and speak to the city as well. So if there was interest in that, we could get that set up.
I think that would be great.
Yeah,
I do too.
I'm in
Yep.
favor of that as well.
Yep. Because it's basically essentially two separate systems, if you will. You have the signage that would identify folks, and then you have the potential to actually eventually download an application on your phone, which could give you notifications of
Yes.
incoming traffic.
Yep, yeah, so you'd have both, and, from my office on second floor, I can see the train, hear the train, and so when I'm, it's 3:30, 4 o'clock, looking to maybe head out of the office, and I see that there's a train and which way it's headed, well, often I'll just, it's a similar sort of thing where you can, if you know where the train is and where it's headed and where it likely will be, you can adapt your schedule and make some decisions, that benefit you and the time that you have. And so, I spend a few more minutes just taking care of stuff and then I head out, versus, sitting in line in a queue of traffic.
Right?
And I guess one more thing, and something that's nearly equally as important to me is the quiet zones. The reason why I'm not really bringing it to light right now is I understand that if indeed we are able to make some improvements, particularly to West Grand with an overpass or underpass, that would drop that rating, if you will, to what would be required to establish a quiet zone, which could significantly reduce that cost for that aspect of the project. Now, unless other folks feel the need to try to bring that to the forefront, I think at this point in time, knowing that we want to put an overpass or underpass in at West Grand, does it pay to maybe put that on hold, or do we continue to talk about it? I think that's something we need to clear the air on as well.
Okay.
And then also, just in the beginning where it says you got those extra context discussions, do we have some kind of timeline on that, Joe? With these contexts you got from CNN?
Certainly sometime this month, I guess, as soon as we can get something scheduled that I'll reach out to them again and see if we can't nail down a date and have those initial discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you all. If there's nothing else, committee, we can go on to number 6. And that's review the referral list. And
So I did kind of clean up the referral list from a month ago. It had a lot of strike-throughs, items that we'd already covered, a lot from even 2022, I think. So kept everything that wasn't stricken, And then I did keep number 5 on there, although it does have a strike through in it. It was, very recent that we talked about that one. I did add a number 6 on there for the review, the change order policy and consider updates. I don't necessarily have updates per se for that, just that it's, every couple of years to reconsider either the dollar amounts or percentages and make sure that it still works for the city. And then the only other item that is kind of a precursor this meeting was, we're at that point where we would make a recommendation for the 14th Street and Avon intersection to have yield signs added. And that's something that, I guess we could propose for possibly next month for consideration.
Okay. And that's, I guess, item 7 would be set the next meeting date, and I didn't bring my calendar in for their meeting in June. It'd be on that Thursday. I believe the first Thursday, or Thursday after the first Tuesday.
Yep, so that'd be June 8th,
Okay, yeah.
5 PM.
June 8th, 5 PM, all right. And the other, we have that bid opening Joe to take care of.
Oh, yes,
A
thanks.
special meeting. I'm gonna be gone, I'm not sure when I'll be back next week, but I would interest in having that opening on, before the council meeting, or a special meeting on that Thursday. I was thinking, Joe, if we did it like a Thursday, I don't know who can make it, though. Instead of waiting till 5, we could do it at 4 or 3 or something if people from the committee and if we did it that way and I wasn't here, I was gonna ask Brian if he'd sit in his chair. So, it's just that one item as far as I know, right? Correct?
Yeah, yep, just that one item, it's for the curb and gutter sidewalk maintenance contract. That bid opening is on Thursday of next week, so anytime, either just after that bid opening. It could be Thursday afternoon, evening, it could be just before council the next week, whatever works best.
Committee, what would your wishes be?
I'm available Thursday, the 11th, in the afternoon, if need be.
And if I'm not back, Ryan, if you'd sit as chair, I'd appreciate that, and
No problem.
I'll ask somebody else if they want to fill in for me on the committee then or something, so
Yeah, Thursday, the 11th,
Thursday 11th, yeah. Okay,
and what time works?
Dennis, can you do 5?
can you do 5 then? Okay, 5 o'clock on the 11th for that bid opening then.
Thank you.
Thank you all. If anything changes, we'll let everybody know, so. And with that.
Mr. Chair, before you adjourn, can we just go back up to the single complaints? There, I was just wanted to ask, is there any work in the future on any of these complaints, or where are you planning on going with them? There's 7 of them listed here.
Yeah, so with any of the complaints, we add them on the list, certainly so we can keep track of them. The ones that are imperative, as specifically a safety issue, those get looked at right away. Some of them that involve new infrastructure improvements, they're a longer term type of item. Like the latest one that was added was flashing yellow arrow request. So it's on there. We won't lose sight of it. It's an additional piece of infrastructure and added expense. It takes some time to review that, and then, of course, budget for it. So, and some of them are just I guess, just concerns because of inconvenience. So, you know, we note them and, you know, we look into them as we have time and based on need and priority. But otherwise, they're there and we continue to,
Well, on
Yeah,
the
and look at
traffic
things.
signals, do you have staff that can work on them, or do you have to contract that out?
it's largely myself that, that reviews these and looks into them. If it's a malfunction, you know, something just isn't working, you know, like the lights are off or maybe a pedestrian button doesn't appear to be working correctly or detectable, the loops, the detections are malfunctioning, we'll get Waterworks and Lighting Commission electricians out to troubleshoot them and see if there's, sometimes they find issues, sometimes they don't, sometimes it's just replace the push button or other piece of infrastructure. But then when we get into a bigger improvement, where we're adding more infrastructure and doing retimings, then we'll usually ask for some additional help, outside help for that.
Okay, and then only other question I have on that request there on that four-way stop at Third and Market, are you looking at that? Is that going to eventually come up to this committee, or?
Yeah, we found some, I guess, I wouldn't say historical documents, but the last time the intersection was studied, we did locate those documents and pulled them out. I have yet to dig into it further than that, but that's why it's still on the list, and if there's a recommendation to change something there, then certainly it'll be before the committee.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay. Me.
Thank you. And if there's no other questions or anything on anything, committee, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is second to adjourn. Committee, all in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the ayes have it.